Hello, I want to welcome you to the Meacham Conversations, and we have Jeff Hardin here with us. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Our usual procedure has been to have you read a poem, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. This is called Concerning Prayers as Intermingled, and it's written to the poet Mark Jarman. Maybe good reasons exist for anything, for everything that happens. Sometimes, though, I have to wonder if heaven has a lookout looking out for us. A lot slips through that frankly seems horrific. A mother and son stop to help a motorist, are struck and killed by a semi, while elsewhere in the world the faithful are beheaded. Armies fall in place. What Ceylon in all his words could not get past has not relented since his death. Perhaps we have deceived ourselves, believing we have consciousness. Is there really a word that truly means Lord? I know I must be foolish to admit I pause sometimes, if only to imagine in a foreign city, cathedral bells, and someone on the street outside who's moved to tears by how their ringing notes accentuate the silence of the morning's radiance. I like to think our souls have always corresponded, impossible of course, but I imagine him as someone who imagines me, and together sense our prayers as intermingled. Sad theme of mine, I know, and one I can't get past. I can't get past a childhood friend who drowned one February night. In the bottomlands, he ran off in the freezing river, managed to climb through the window into the truck bed. His girlfriend, not able to swim either, he threw toward the shore in the pitch black dark. Then he drifted toward the absence he became. I try to be there with him as he knows he can't escape. To not imagine how he hears her scream his name, to not imagine what he thinks or doesn't think those final moments, feels like an abandonment to me. So sometimes, still, I pray for him, though 30 years have passed. I see the fields we searched that night for hours, spotlights and screaming, hoping that he got ashore downstream. I understand a prayer prayed 30 years ago cannot be prayed again and cannot change an aftermath. I know that knowing never truly gets ashore. It writhes, it flails, it strains and clutches at the absences. I know that anywhere I walk is also elsewhere in the world. Cathedral bells renew the air where days before a bomb explodes. Traffic readjusts. I go on living as if all that happens doesn't leave me in a soul I sometimes do not care about. Still, the moment he goes under, I go under too. Compassed about in that great darkness closing in, I strive against the current. I hold his face to mine.
Wow, thank you. That's pretty amazing the way all those contexts come together in there. And kind of what holds them together is that sense of unity, what they call in physics entanglement, how everything is sort of bouncing off and affecting each other and the speaker himself. Yeah. What did Mark say to that? We interviewed Mark on this series.
I'm not sure he understood why I wrote it to him, I suppose, and I'm not sure that I know. I've written a lot of these poems that are addressed to specific people, probably 20 at least of these poems. And I think I imagined when I began them, in what way do our sensibilities overlap? In what way, what can I say to this specific person that I can't really say to anybody else? And so that's how the poems began for me. The first one I wrote to my pen pal, Jan Matthews. And then I wrote several that followed that. But the one I wrote to Mark, it's been a lot of years, but Questions for Ecclesiastes, that particular book when it came out. You know, I could enter that space of that poem very much. I didn't have a friend who committed suicide, as happens in that particular poem. He goes with his father into a room where a family is grieving. But I did have access to that room. And just the questions of that. I mean, in fact, this particular poem, as I wrote it, kept getting away from me, kept changing the line breaks and everything. And I didn't really know exactly what I was trying to do. And in one of my revisions, I came across relining the poem, and I found that line, "Perhaps we have deceived ourselves, believing." I mean, the poem goes on from there, but when I saw that line, "Perhaps we have deceived ourselves, believing," you know, Mark is a writer of faith, as am I, and you know, if heaven has a lookout for us, there's a lot that seems to slip through, and you know, how do you deal with this? That became part of the poem.
Yeah, it's interesting how those little, in the process of writing and composing, that there's some little phrase or line that appears out of nowhere, you know, and it's you have to trust those things. I remember Charlie Simic famous phrase, "I wanted to take the poem to church, but it took me to the dog races," you know. And when you said, you know, it was almost out of hand as you were going at that was kind of interesting just to see that process.
Well, I think this might sound strange to say, but it's as though every single word is both vehicle and tenor. And it sets in motion how you see the next word or the next phrase.
Sure.
The next line changes how you see what just came before it and the possibilities that are emerging. And that whole process of writing is so mysterious.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing to get students to understand sometimes, is that a word doesn't just mean the dictionary meaning, it means what it means in relation to the other words. And the other thing that's interesting about that is you can use a word or a phrase in a poem, and I know you've written a lot of other poems in conjunction with other people, I mean, like echoing back and forth and addressed to other people, but also those words take on particular meaning when they're in the context of another writer.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, I did a lecture a few years ago based on something I've said in my classes for almost 30 years. A poet owns a word, would be this thing I would say. Emily Dickinson owns the word slant. So if you or I use it, it's an echo of her. And then that morphed into me in class one day saying, well, if a poet owns a word owns a poem. So what word in this poem that we're examining teaches you how to think about all the other words? Mm-hmm. And of course, there's no correct answer. There's just possibilities that emerge from that. But that's been many years ago that emerged in my classes. But I think it's changed how I think about writing. I write every day, but my books are usually about on a decade delay. And so I'd like to be at a stage where every word I put down on a page, I hear the reverberations back through every other word I've written. I know that's not possible, but I like the premise of it.
Yeah, that's real interesting. That whole sense of writing every day, I've tried to do that sometimes. It's just like, you know, it's in your blood, I think, or not.
Yeah, I think, well, the way I've explained this in recent years, you know, writing every day feels like I live next to a really vast woods. And every day I get to walk around in the woods. And every day I see something I've never seen before.
Sure.
And so if a day goes by and I don't do that, I'm kind of wondering, well, what did I miss? You know, not every poem obviously is earth-shattering or life-changing, but I think I'm more a process writer than a product. I love writing. I mean, I don't really know how to exist any other way.
Well, you were saying that before that you actually you write a poem every day.
Yes, I wrote one this morning.
Okay, well, I see you have another one there.
Yes.
Why don't we finish by having you read that?
Okay. This actually speaks to, I guess, some of what we just said. It's called One Moment Touching All the Others. If only each line of a poem could be its true beginning. If only each moment could know every other moment, and we could hold them all at once the way we wish to, the way we keep imagining we can. I don't care what anyone says about the impossibility, for I step into the same moment again and again. I've lived such a blessed life, a dying friend told me, as I leaned in close and caressed her face. I am writing this line, this poem's true beginning, 6 years later, touching her radiant face again. Every moment is the time I followed a yellow leaf downstream when I was 9. To be or not to be, Hamlet asked, and 2 centuries later, Issa's poems were born. And yet, the cancer still arrives to steal her breath, the same breath blessing all her time. Just now, a purple bird flew up and startled me, and I said, yes, yes, and raised my hands. To live lightly in the body is to live deeply in the spirit. I say her words out loud some days, holding them all at once, and follow a yellow leaf through overhanging limbs, and enter my grandfather's quiet steps along a ridge a century ago when he was young. He is being and not being, in and out of shadows, arriving wherever the next step takes him, here and here. When rain begins, he just keeps walking, drenched and smiling, emerging decades later, holy. Sometimes an echo hints from half a life ago. A driveway puddle trembles at the foster home I lived in when I was 3. Good Lord, son, how did you know how to get here? The father asked when I showed up, adult, from 2 towns over. In the beginning was the Word, John wrote, for each word starts anew, each word startling the sky, the cells, the breath. Each word, each line is an echo, an arrival, a blessed breath, being and not being. I don't care about the impossibility of anything. The dawn keeps breaking for which I am awake. The prologue is the epilogue a leaf holding everything at once. I keep arriving where I am, born and blessed again. I lean in close to radiance. I've always known how to get here.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks.